Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Chrissy Hodges. I'm an advocate for OCD, in particular pure OCD, which is the name of my memoir. And I do peer support and referral consultations for individuals all over the world to help you find therapists that specialize in treating OCD. Now, NoCD is an app in OCD, but they are also a treatment provider for telehealth ERP. So if you are looking for a therapist wherever you are and you want to check them out, go to treatmyocd.com. If you're looking for services with me, go to chrissyhodges.com, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Today I wanted to talk about the relapse or the lapse or whatever you call when OCD returns, whether that be before treatment and you've had a break with it, or after treatment and the fear of experiencing OCD the way that you did before treatment. So you might disagree with me on this, and I don't really care if you do or not, because a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about this. I can only go by my own experience and also by the countless people that I've seen around the world who live with OCD, but relapse is inevitable. And that can feel really scary for people. Why? Because when we have OCD, we have very black and white thinking. So it's everything is going to be gloom and doom or everything is great. And there's not a lot in between unless we really force ourselves to jump into that in between, and that can be hard, which is what drives the cycle of OCD. So when we think about experiencing symptoms again after we aren't experiencing symptoms, so things may have been great, or lots of people will write and say it ebbed and flowed, and I went a really long time where it didn't bother me at all, and all of a sudden it's come back. And that was my experience too. Before I knew that what I was experiencing was sexual intrusive thoughts, religious scrupulosity with OCD, I would just hang on to those times where the symptoms would break and I would feel like they would move to the back of my head and I could live life. And I would always fear when the symptoms would come back and kind of overwhelm me. Now, what I didn't know and what I didn't realize until later in recovery, but of course back then I didn't even know I had OCD at that point, so there was no internet. But later in life and later in recovery, something that I have discovered is that OCD is just it's part of my life in the way that it can show up not only for things like, am I a pedophile, or am I a murderer, or am I gonna molest my dogs, or these awful, scary, unwanted, horrible thoughts. But I also get really OCD or have OCD over things that are normal life. Just like the video I shared with you last week. Having health concerns about coming in contact with a raccoon is pretty normal, right? I mean, most people would be really cautious and careful and do proper research on how to handle baby raccoons so they don't get diseases. Well, that's a normal thing, but my OCD took it and just spun it, right? Until I no longer was rationally dealing with okay, we're being careful and clean. I was over here with the 0.0001% that was going to impact me. I get OCD over my taxes. I feel OCD symptoms when I have an argument with a friend or coworkers, or if something happens at work, I might ruminate, but I don't identify it as OCD because I usually identify OCD as awful, terrible thoughts that are terrorizing me. And when is it going to be better? And when is it going to, because those feel like you can never solve them, right? I mean, your taxes, you do solve them because there's tax day and you do them and you're done. And whether it's good or bad, at least you know the outcome. So the line can get blurred sometimes on, oh my goodness, OCD is showing up, or is that way of ruminating, mentally reviewing, avoiding, I avoid taxes, at times. I pay them, but I like the extension. Is that OCD, and is it just part of my everyday life? So this is one of the things that I have learned over the last, especially 5 years. To deny that I ruminate over almost everything is a disservice to myself. It doesn't mean that I'm suffering all the time. It just means that this is part of my problem solving. And that actually may be the malfunction of the brain of me overthinking things. So I share with you all of this as a way to say, for me, when I got treatment, and if you've read my book, you know this, or watched a lot of my videos. When I got treatment, I very much thought, we're done. Okay, that was horrible. I hit rock bottom. I got treatment, I got better, and I'll never have to worry about this again. So I'm gonna go live life and never think about it. And that was wrong of me. I'm only talking about my story, so I'm not talking about you. The reason why is because I wasn't aware that you don't correct this in your brain, you manage it. And that's why we go to therapy. That's why we learn different tools on how to manage this, because you're not correcting a problem, you're managing the problem. So if you just throw the tools in the trash can and go, we're all good now, then you're likely to suffer when OCD shows back up. And this is where we come back to when a lapse happens, when a relapse happens, whatever you want to call it, by the way. I'm not assigning any sort of meaning or any degree. A lapse could be I had a bad day, or a relapse could be I had a bad day, or a relapse could be I have sunk into the pit for 3 months. Either way, when OCD shows back up. Okay, so a lot of people fear the lapse. They fear the relapse. I didn't, because I was just in straight denial. I was like, this will never happen again. And that did not serve me well. So when I did relapse many years later, I had actually had lapses before, but it wasn't this obscure fear. And so I didn't recognize it as OCD. But then when I got harm OCD, then I was like, I think this is OCD. And the fear of the OCD was there, but the fear of going back to the degree of suffering that I had experienced became a very great fear. And I want to share this with you because I think it's important for you to hear that you may have experienced or are experiencing trauma with OCD. You won't hear this from a lot of your OCD therapists, or you won't hear this a lot in advocacy, because for some reason our community seems to think that talking about trauma with OCD is just forbidden and ridiculous. And I'm here to tell you that people get traumatized by OCD, full stop. There's so many areas that you can get traumatized by. You can get traumatized by the content, by the onset, by the consistency, the duration, by being depressed and suicidal. And when you experience that trauma, the thought of going back to that type of suffering, you may be having a trauma response. So you may need some professional help to work through that piece, because when we work through the depths and we get out of the hole, the black hole we like to call it, like when you slide all the way down to that, and that's a place of hopelessness, and so many of us have been there. We then fear that place because of how bad it got. We know how bad it can get. So the fear of being back down there again is terrifying. So sometimes when we think of relapse, we're actually fearing that. And I want to shed some light and some hope on that, to say that relapse doesn't have to be that way. If you build building blocks with tools, those tools you don't unlearn. If you use medication and medication works for you, you can always go back and use medication again. There's nothing wrong with medication. You can't unlearn things, but we can keep moving forward and learning more things. I always think of it as I've put all these blocks over the black hole down here where I was so scared and isolated. So when I slide down into that hole, I fall on those tools. And I have to remember, I do have tools and I can use them. I mean, of course I want to feel better right now. And then the fear of being at the bottom is so terrifying to me too. But I just have to pull my shit together sometimes and be like, look, and I tell this to clients a lot. Look, you were at rock bottom and you found a way out. I know it was hard and I know it didn't feel good and I know you don't want to be there again, but you did it. You did it. That's resilience. That is strength. What makes you think you don't have that now? Or more of it, especially since you pulled out of it once or twice or numerous times. Look, here's what I know. Relapse is inevitable. Relapse is also one of the greatest teachers that we can have. But there is so much fear around it that sometimes the fear of the relapse itself becomes OCD. For me, relapse has taught me that instead of having to react and having this urgency all the time, I can feel it coming, I can anticipate it coming. December is always a hard month for me. The summer is always hard for me. As y'all saw, I just had a huge lapse last week. I mean, circumstances were what they were, but it doesn't matter. Summers are always hard for me. Time of the month is hard for me, especially PMS. That's hard. Stress is hard. Relapse teaches us to start to look for things that make OCD worse instead of hoping beyond hope OCD won't get worse. Relapse teaches us to dig into that toolbox and go, this worked last time, let's try this again. Now, I know the fear is always there. Well, it's not going to work this time. Or this time I'm going to find out that it's not OCD. Or this time it's real. I was saying that last week, by the way. But relapse pushes us to do that. And the more that we do that, the more we really start to believe we got this. And we can do it. And we also start to believe, wow, this is OCD. Behaviorally, you believe that because the tools work. Or maybe I need to go to a different therapist. Or maybe I need to try, trauma therapy because it seems to be tied to trauma. I mean, obviously you don't do trauma therapy to treat OCD, but you can do trauma therapy around your experience with OCD. Or maybe things in your childhood that are traumatic or driving your stress levels that may amp up and cause OCD, so maybe getting help for that. So recovery is ongoing. I know we want it to stop. I know we want it to be like, I made it. I did it. I'll never experience it again. And you might not. And that's awesome too. But many of us don't get to that point, and then we feel scared and frustrated and weak. So what I've discovered and what's helped me is to understand that all I can do is build out my life with awareness, acceptance, I know we hate that word, and continuing to gain skills, mindfulness of being mindful of what's going on in my body and my surroundings and my stress levels. So when I feel myself doing compulsions, which is how I recognize it's OCD, I can put those tools to use so I don't slide all the way back down. So recovery is an ongoing process, and relapse and lapses are part of that in order to grow and get better at managing OCD. This is why I always say, some people come on and they're like, unsubscribe, this isn't helpful. Well, I don't care. If you don't like what I have to say about it, you don't have to announce it, babe. Just leave. But people really want to believe, I get therapy one and done. And for some people, I think that may happen and that's great. But for a lot of people, you also need to know it's okay to keep experiencing OCD or have to work or have a lapse and get through it. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's just part of learning to live and manage OCD. Okay, so I hope this helps. This is a big fear for a lot of people. I do want you to know you're not alone with it. People really fear the relapse, and a lot of times they're also fearing the trauma response of what it felt like to be that low. So if you need peer support, this is something that peer support can really, really help with, by the way. Just to get on a call, help work through and process what's going on and what tools have worked for you before. And then, kind of me supporting you in making the next decisions for your own recovery. So if you're interested in that, go to ChrissyHodges.com and I can give you some information. Or if you're looking for referrals for therapists who do ERP around the world, we can help connect you with that too. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.